One Punch Man continues to get crazier and crazier, and when I tell you this chapter is unbelievable, I seriously mean it. We firstly open up to a shot of Garou's new form approaching the shore as the luminescence of the moon breaks through the clouds above and onto him. This depiction is furthermore accompanied by the text, "A herald from the abyss comes together with despair." Getting into the contents of the chapter itself, we begin with an explanation of Bang's signature technique, the Water Stream Rock Smashing Fist, particularly the fact that it applies knowledge of the flow of energy behind things such as tidal surges and raging currents and replicates them within a person's body, which is then channeled into one's fists. And it's with this that we receive a proper explanation behind Garou's incredible ability to instantly absorb and copy the techniques of others, as it is actually an extension of this very flow. But now, things have changed tremendously as Garou currently possesses knowledge of the flow of all energy, along with the behavior of all forces in the universe. This is absolutely unreal for a number of reasons, as essentially, Garou is now an omni-force. In theory, at this point, Garou can mimic any power and or ability in the universe perfectly, which is major for later on. But to begin his demonstration of power, Garou would kick things off with one of the most insane moves we have ever seen in the series, the likes of which seemingly exceed the lethality of certain moves from Saitama. This was All Life Eradication Fist, Nuclear Fission, as the fist of Garou would now be on par with a weapon of mass destruction and would be sent hurtling towards the face of Saitama, doing so at such absurd speeds that Saitama didn't even have a chance to react and was instead left dumbfounded. And good lord, what a fallout this attack yielded. The many heroes who had gotten to safety, who were at this point quite a ways away, would feel the impact of it as well and need to brace themselves. Meanwhile, the crew of the naval cruiser would be left to wonder what was going on this time, as suddenly, the ship provided an especially alarming alert. Quote, "Decontamination system activated for all sections of the vessel." As it turns out, the name of Garou's latest attack was not just for show. This onslaught was literally a nuclear attack. Now let's try and get a grasp of just how insane this really is. At the barest of minimums, a nuclear bomb is the equivalent of approximately 10 tons of TNT. That is 20,000 pounds of TNT. Now, a single ton of TNT apparently releases about 4.2 times 10 to the 12th power joules of energy. And this is 10 times more than that. And speaking of more, this man Garou did it several times over, numbering 5 that we see. And would you believe me if I told you that this is weak compared to what comes later in the chapter? Yeah, I know, ridiculous. Almost as ridiculous as the fact that thanks to all of you, we are now past the 500,000 subscriber milestone. Seriously, thank you all so much. We can't even begin to fully express our gratitude, but best believe we will do our very best to do so very soon, so look out for it. However, we would also receive another onlooker in the form of Psychos, who we haven't seen in a while. But she would actually provide a pretty interesting tidbit of insight, as apparently these attacks from Garou are the same sort that Homer's Emperor was capable of, albeit several times more sizable and powerful. What she, as someone also previously contacted by God, was able to recognize to be divine power. And like proper nuclear blasts, these attacks would conclude with some insanely big mushroom clouds. And speaking of insane, more than just a color page, Murata would provide us with an animated GIF in this chapter. This is something I'm honestly surprised we haven't seen more digital manga series do in the past, but of course when you intend to publish your work in physical volumes as well, things such as this, albeit cool, may furthermore serve to complicate things. But man, Murata is seriously a different breed. This wasn't necessary in the slightest, but boy oh boy does it make me appreciate him so much more, and long for this arc to be properly animated. I mean, it is going to really ignite the anime game in a whole new way. But sidetracking just a bit, you may or may not have noticed that we've been a bit more experimental in our editing lately, and hopefully you enjoy it. And listen, if you're interested in trying your hand at editing your own videos, Filmora may be a great tool for you to start with. It is a very beginner-friendly editing software that also doesn't shy away from providing some pretty useful and advanced features. It is designed to save you time, allowing you to better focus on the vision you have in mind. In fact, it even has a text-to-speech and speech-to-text feature, so in theory, you shouldn't even need to record your own voice if you don't want to. I mean, you can easily just drag and drop some footage into the editing track and get started immediately. Now, the Filmora11 plugins Boris FX and New Blue are pretty interesting, and I think they'll be pretty powerful for anyone looking to create high-tech and or futuristic videos. Now, I for one love talking into the microphone, but for quicker forms of content, like on TikTok, text-to-speech can be pretty cool. And with a link in the description, you can try Filmora yourself for free to see if you like it before making any purchase. The free version actually has all the same features as the paid for one, but a watermark will remain. But you know what, if you share your videos with the hashtag MadeWithFilmora, you may very well be able to enjoy even more benefits by being selected as a Filmora certified creative. But anyways, back to the main topic at hand. Many of the heroes were in disbelief and could not fathom what could possibly be fighting within such colossal attacks. Genos, of course, being able to make out the silhouette of his master, seemingly wondering what sort of battle he might be engaged in. Meanwhile, on the interior of one such mushroom cloud, Saitama would cry out in dismay on account of his hero costume being ruined. Garou, in his now distorted voice, would wonder if Saitama was really worried about his outfit at a time like this, now expressing that he is seen through the man's moves completely. And this sort of talk bugged Saitama a bit, as Garou was already back to his ways of talking like some kind of bad guy before getting stomped out with ease all over again. But to this, Garou would state that he feels like he can do anything at this point, and this is for good reason. As would be explained, in martial arts there are secret techniques known as shike, which borrow the power of nature by imitating the movements of living things, which are what Garou refers to as modes. And this latest mode of his would be the most ridiculous one yet, Mode Saitama, as we would then have the face of Saitama appear over the featureless one of Garou, much to the horror of Saitama himself. And from there, Garou would use Saitama's move, consecutive normal punches. Saitama would then counter this with the exact same move. These two would clash against one another in complete unison, which would completely disperse this once looming mushroom cloud. This would then conclude with Saitama and Garou trading fists to the face and sending one another hurtling into the depths of the ocean. However, it wouldn't take long for them both to jettison outwards. Garou at this point was laughing heavily. Here he'd question if this was the first time someone had matched Saitama in such an exchange of blows, additionally assuming the hero to be at a loss for words. And getting a bit ahead of himself, Garou would express that they may be evenly matched for the moment, but the techniques he copies get honed to perfection at blistering speeds, that soon, Saitama wouldn't even be able to match the copy. And after Garou said this, Saitama would be a bit disappointed, as after all, he'd made such a big deal about telling Tadao that he would not hurt Garou. Garou would be silent at first, but would begin to laugh all over again, as despite now standing as Saitama's equal, the hero was still concerned about Tadao. Now, Garou, as powerful as he may be, doesn't seem to understand that Saitama has been holding back tremendously throughout the entirety of this fight. He doesn't want to hurt Garou at all. He really just wants to make him reroute his behavior. And if at any point Saitama actually felt threatened or anything of the sort, he'd actually be really happy. We know that he actually longs for a proper challenge. The fact that he is still largely unfazed just goes to show that Garou is not truly pushing him in the slightest. But that wouldn't stop Garou from going further than he ever has before, as he would make use of a move that initially looks to be somewhat reminiscent of last dimensional rifts. Here he would remember his vow to show Tadao just how powerless heroes are, which convinced Saitama that the guy was concerned for the kid as well. This was All Life Eradication Fist. Saitama, seeing it being charged up, would quickly drop onto the surface of the water and bounce up like from a trampoline, because despite not knowing what Garou was doing, he knew it would be pretty bad if this next attack of his so much as graces the ground. But Garou would call Saitama a fool for believing he'd be able to dodge by jumping, as he would then let off his Gamma Ray Burst attack. And remember when I said things got even more powerful? Well, here we are. As it turns out, a gamma ray burst is an explosion that occurs at the end of a massive star's life, what is known to be the largest and most powerful explosive phenomenon in the known universe. And this very attack of such incomprehensible might will be delivered onto Saitama directly. Now, I can try and express just how powerful this cataclysmic occurrence happens to be, but seriously, the math behind it is just so astounding that it would require an entire video of its own. But what I will say is that unlike the nuclear attacks from before, there is just no way in hell that this attack is accurate to its name. I mean, forget grazing the Earth. If a gamma ray burst was even several thousand light years away, it would be the end of nearly all life on Earth, and most definitely the end of all human life on Earth. Regardless, it is a stupidly powerful attack. The onlookers would comment on the fact that it made things even brighter than daytime. Bomb would wonder if this could possibly be someone's special move, which one of the tank top guys would dismiss as impossible. However, Metal Bat would actually awaken on account of this brightness, still very much injured and seemingly alerted to something. Meanwhile, Sweet Mask would pull up on my guy Flashy Flash, questioning why the S-Class hero had a monster with him. And Flashy Flash, with his hair wet like a cover model, would calmly respond that he found an exotic animal that was useful for lighting up the darkness, as Monaco would awkwardly introduce herself. And I must say that I love the idea of these two characters sticking together. I am a big fan, but to interrupt this exchange would be the descent of Garou. Here he would stand before them all, as no one would dare utter a single word. Garou was just way too imposing. It was at that very moment that all the heroes knew without a shadow of a doubt that the source of the massive explosion of energy they had seen previously was this very monster. A monster which Bang would recognize to be his former protege. The riffraff would be on the verge of wetting themselves here, as Tank Top Master, the first S-Class victim of Garou, would be in disbelief of this new monstrous form of his. Again, this pressure of his was far too imposing. Zombie Man instinctually knew that this was really bad. Meanwhile, Flashy Flash, again as one of the fastest characters in the series, immediately knew that running away would be pointless. Garou was just standing there, menacingly. And in doing so, the majority of heroes would simply drop down and lose their minds. And it was with this that Garou would question if he had finally become it, the symbol of fear that brings all heroes to despair. His dream, absolute evil. From which point he'd simply look up to the sky and say, thank you. As from the look of the stars on his face, it appeared as though Garou was crying tears of joy. But to interrupt this, Bang would crawl towards his student turned monster and verbally question if it was in fact him, as Garou would coldly take note of the fact that the old man was still alive. Bang would then question what happened to Garou, as before, when they fought, he felt a bodily response that Garou had come back to his senses. Not only that, but he had overheard Garou say, thank you, which would make him wonder if a monster had done this to him. Garou would be silent at first, but would then respond by saying, not really. He always had his senses. Here we would be provided even more context behind Garou's interaction with God. Here, God pretending to be Bang would extend his hand, and rather than grabbing hold of it, Garou would slap it out of the way. He didn't believe this ploy for 1 second, as there was no way Bang would ever act like such a softie. But this smile would quickly shift as Garou would suddenly reel from the changes to his body. The mysterious figure would then let it be known that even if Garou didn't fully take his hand, he did just barely touch it. Which is just absurd. You mean to tell me that what we have been seeing thus far hasn't even been the proper bestowal of God's gifts? This is just a touch of it? Unreal. Garou, as he recoiled, would have his suspicions confirmed, as this was in fact a monster he was dealing with, now wondering what had been done to him. God would then explain that he will make Garou his avatar, and with that power, he already knows what has to be done. And interestingly enough, God has ears here. A simple inclusion that definitely reminds me of our main character's appearance. But as he said this, he disappeared in an instant. Garou apparently almost lost consciousness from the crazy flow of power that surged throughout the entirety of his body. Garou, now speaking to Bang once more, would remind his former master of the fact that he had once taught him to feel the flow of energy and become one with that flow, what in essence was the power of the water stream. But at this point, Garou has pretty much become one with the flow and has successfully begun controlling it. And so for this prior teaching, he was grateful. Garou avoided becoming one of God's puppets, and thanks to this, from this point onwards, what he decides to do will be of his own free will. Bang, now even more concerned, would ask Garou what he was going to do. Garou, standing there in silence, would again recall the words of Tadao, as the kid called him the coolest, greatest hero of them all. Mentally, Garou would apologize to little Tadao and accept this to be goodbye, deciding that now it was time to conduct evil. There is no turning back, and man are these heroes terrified. However, the fact that Garou is proceeding to do this is hilarious to me. Does he really think that Saitama won't get back up from that latest move? I mean, it is just crazy. He clearly hasn't learned his lesson well enough, so it is time for remedial classes. But yeah, as always, I'm Slice of Otaku. Thank you all so much for watching and have an awesome day. I love you.